And we're live. Hopefully this is working. Hopefully my microphone is working. Somebody let me know if it's working. I was watching the time, and then all of a sudden I turned my head, and all of a sudden it's time. It's time to go. This is... Hopefully my microphone is working. Oh, my microphone is working on my computer. So let's get started. This is RockSim Live. My name is Tim Van Milligan. This is where we talk about RockSim, RockSim Pro, and the Launch Visualizer. It's all part of the same family. This is live, so if you would like to ask a RockSim question, this is your chance to do it. And I have no agenda today, so I am willing and able to try to answer your questions. We got a lot of people in the house, a lot of names I don't know. But that's all great. We got high power rocket and stuff. He just says, Tim. Carlos K says, audio's good. Ashley Carrier says, loud and clear. Andrew Simon says, mic sounds good. 3D printer guy says, hi, do you think a 75 millimeter by 2 meter rocket will look silly? Nope. I think it looks great. Wally Ferrer, he's here from Virginia. Carlos is from slightly smoky Marietta, Georgia. Andrew Simon from Ohio, and Art Applewhite from Texas. Art, I'm going to be in Texas next week. I'll be in Denton at the University of Northern Texas. I'm taking my daughter to her orientation, so she's getting ready to go off to college. And it's smoky in Marietta, Georgia. So you guys are experiencing what we get every summer here in Colorado. We get the smoke from the wildfires. But this summer, I got to tell you something. It's going to be great in Colorado because we're getting a lot of rain. And we've been having a drought for a good 10 years. They said that our drought that we've just experienced has been worse than the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. So that's how bad it's been. But now we're getting some rain finally, and it's greening up, and it's so nice outside. When you go fly rockets, it's nice and green. So that's so great. Okay, we have Terry Wheelock here. We have HPR Rocket Stuff, and he says, did you ever get a new range box? I really need to get a new range box because I need to get one before I leave for Texas. So I'm going to be looking down at the Walmart store here pretty soon for a new range box so that I can travel a little bit lighter when I go down to the World Space Modeling Championships. We got Ashley says, when it's question time, I'm getting into reloads and high power rockets. Does RockSim account for the casing weight? Okay, we'll answer that question. 3D printer guy says, nice with more rain in the UK. It's less rain and more sun now. Okay, well, that's good. Maybe you'll get to fly some more rockets. Okay, so let me show you my screen here. And this is our website. And if you're new to Apogee components in RockSim, I'll kind of quickly go through where to find it. So you go to apogeerockets.com, and then there's a scrolling banner right here. You can sign up for our newsletter, which is really great. We got a free giveaway of 25 free rocket plans when you sign up. This is the Launch Visualizer. It tells you to go to rocksim.com to play with that. And then here's RockSim 10. And you click on this and you can download a free demo. If you scroll down a little bit on our webpage, we got the RockSim Live Training is what we're doing right now. When you click on that, it'll take you to the archive page, and this will tell you what we talked about previous episodes. We're on episode number 124 today. Today is June 9, 2023. So this is what we kind of talked about last week. We talked about Aerotech's new Aerospike nozzle that was released on a J motor. It's just one specific motor. This gives you the timestamp on where we talked about it. So those are the timestamps for everything. If you're searching for something, you can do a Control F on this page, and it brings up this little search bar window up here. And then you can type in what you want to talk about, like scaling, like here's how to scale a design, episode 80, and then you just go to 1 hour and 5 minutes into the video, and there's the link, and it will take you to how to use RockSim to scale a rocket. So that's if you're looking for something particular. We have so much information, and you guys ask such great questions. Yeah, so then also if you go up to the top of the page and you go to the how-to and guides, click on that. Come down here to software, and here's the RockSim menu, the free trial, where to purchase it, just general overview, general features, frequently asked questions, what can you do with RockSim, system requirements, what computers do you need to run it, version history, what we've changed in the past, and then there's tutorials and the RockSim live training, which I already showed you. Lots of good stuff here. So this is kind of your menu on getting started with RockSim. So the first question was, does RockSim account for the engine casing weight? And okay, so we'll answer that question. So I am in RockSim, so let's open up a design, and we're going to kind of go through it to figure out how can we tell if RockSim includes the casing weight or not. Okay, so let's open up. It doesn't really matter. I'm just looking for something. Here's a Katana. This is a high power rocket, and he's getting into high power rockets. So right now we have a mass of 210 grams, and if you look back here, well, if you've never used RockSim before, you can't tell if this contains a motor or not, but it does. Right here it says shown without rocket engines. So what we're seeing is the weight of the rocket without rocket engines. So now let's load a motor in here and find out if RockSim does account for the casing weight. So let's load a motor, and we'll choose an engine. I don't know, we'll go with the J180, doesn't matter. And if you look over here, it doesn't tell me. I was looking for the motor weight. But it doesn't show me the motor weight. But let's load the engine anyway. So we'll just load it, and we're just going to select the delay, 14 seconds. Click OK. So now we went from 2,100 to 2,800 grams. So obviously we added a motor plus the propellant into this rocket. So now let's do a launch. So we're going to go to up here at the top, and this is prepare for launch. And what this little icon is the rocket with two arrows pointing down to the launch pad. So we're going to click on that. That's prepare for launch. And again, we're back to where we were. We had the motor in here. Let's just set this up for a flight. This is actually a dual deployment rocket, and we have a parachute and a 48-inch parachute. So I'm assuming that this is the smaller parachute, and we'll deploy that one at Apogee, and this other one we'll deploy at an altitude, and then we'll scroll through here and specify an altitude of, I don't know, 600 feet, and hit tab. Okay, so now we got our parachute set up. The starting state, we need to be at a 98-inch launch rod, because this is a high power rocket. That's 8 feet. Launch angle, we're going to launch, we'll give it a 5-degree tilt. So we're tilting that way 5 degrees, and launch conditions, we got an 8-mile-an-hour wind coming through, and let's see the flight profile. So we're just running a quick launch here. So here's the rocket taking off, And the rocket's going up, and it's going to get to the, I'm going to grab the slider bar here, and I'm going to speed it through the flight. And so we can see that the rocket did come down. So these dots are 1 second apart. So when the dots are going further apart, the rocket's accelerating. When they start getting closer together, the rocket's decelerating. When they look to be about the same distance apart, that means it's flying at a constant speed. So here's a constant speed, and it's coming down, and then all of a sudden it changes right here. The dots get closer together, which means it's coming down slower. So this is your classic dual deployment trajectory, where the small parachute allows it to come down really fast, and then the big parachute opens up right here, and then it comes down slower. Okay, so now, does RockSim account for the casing weight and the propellant weight? So we already loaded the motor in here, and you saw that the mass changed. So now that includes casing and propellant, or casing or just propellant. So that's what we want to know. So what we'll do is we'll go up here to the graphs, this button up here, we'll go plot. And let's, so on the x-axis it's going to be time. On the y-axis, let's find mass. There's mass right here. And let's do, see if we can get altitude. Here's altitude, and then we'll clear out this one here. And let's go, we'll go to the end of the data. Okay, and then we'll plot this graph. Okay, so here is the graph. Let me make this bigger so that we can see it a little bit better. Okay, so this blue line is the altitude, and that's, again, this is that same, similar to that trajectory, but this is altitude only, and you can see that it does slow down here. What we're interested in is the green line, which is the mass, and so it starts at a high mass right here, and then it drops down to here. Okay, let me make this bigger so that we can see it. So I'm going to stop this graph around 10 seconds, because after 10 seconds the green line flattens out and the mass is not changing. So to change this, we'll go back to the preferences, and the graph data ending point will say at the following flight time, and we'll type in a number of 10 seconds and then plot the graph. And again, so now we're just looking at the first 10 seconds of the flight. So what we notice here is that liftoff mass is about 2850 grams, and then it drops down, and then it bottoms out here. So what I think I'm going to do is, what I want to show is the thrust of the motor. So I'm going to go back here to preferences. I'm going to clear out altitude, and we'll put in thrust. So here's thrust, and then plot the graph. Okay, so now the blue line is the thrust of the motor, and we can see when burnout occurs right here. So this is our burnout, and you can see that the mass of the rocket is getting lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter until we get to burnout. And at burnout, we're approximately 2,460 grams, somewhere in that area. Okay, so that's our burnout weight. But it's still, I don't know if you remember, when there wasn't a casing, when we didn't load a motor, we were around 2,100, is that correct? It was around 2,100 grams. Now, when we had a full motor, it was 28, but now we're down to 24. So that tells me that it's accounting for something. There's an extra weight in there. So I'm guessing that it's probably the casing. So let me go back here, and let's take this motor out. So right now, with the at liftoff, we're at 2850, and I'm going to unload the motor, clear all, and it dropped down. Oh, actually, it was 2,010 grams. And then when we loaded the motor, it was 2,800 grams. And then at burnout, it was 2,400 grams. So that tells me that yes, RockSim is including the casing weight of the motor, reload motor. So you don't have to do anything different when you're using RockSim, when you're flying high power or any reload motor. RockSim knows that the weight includes the casing and the propellant, and during the flight, the propellant is going to burn off and go away. And that's why we saw our mass coming down. So hopefully that accounts for that first question. It was kind of long, but I wanted to walk it through just to make sure, just to show, how would you actually show that RockSim is accounting for the casing weight. So visual evidence is what I wanted to present there. 3D printer guy says, and being British, I hate the heat. Lots of laughs. Anything over 20 degrees centigrade is too hot. Yeah, but do you have humidity? If you do, then it's too hot. If you don't have humidity, it's more tolerable. Rosa is from Ottawa, and they're here. Carlos K says, bar quiz question. What is the oldest rocket engine that you have successfully launched? I just found a lot of 20-year-old plus motors. I've launched some pretty old motors. If they're successfully, I should say, if they are stored, what really hurts motors is humidity. So if they're stored in a dry container where the humidity doesn't fluctuate much, and if the temperature doesn't fluctuate much, they'll last a long time. The military uses motors that are really old. They test, one of the things they do is they put desiccant in the boxes with the motors in it, just to keep them, at that constant humidity level. So I don't know what the exact oldest motor I've flown is, but I've flown some pretty old ones. Chuck Garnes is here, and he says, hi, Tim. He says, checking in from Pittsburgh. Oh, cool. Andrew Simon, got a lot of rocket stuff off eBay and got a lot of old motors. Still haven't launched any, though. Well, yeah, when you're buying them from somebody else, then they're a little bit more suspect. So be careful. Always make sure that you're launching with that max, the minimum safety distance, and you can be further away. There's no problem being further away. So always be careful. Always follow the model rocket safety code. It's there for our protection. So Wally says, my sims are always higher than actual flight. What should I do to correct for that, if possible? I verify CG and weight and assume amount of drag may be the issue. And Wally, you're probably right. It's probably the drag on the rocket that's the issue. If everything, if your masses are correct when the rocket lifts off, it's probably the drag of the rocket. And I'm going to go back here to the rocket simulation that we just ran. And this time I'm going to show, let's show velocity, and let's show, I'm looking for coefficient of drag. Drag. Okay, CD. And we can also plot the total drag force right here. And let's make this as 20 seconds and hit tab, and let's see what's going on here. Okay, so our blue line right here is the velocity of the rocket. As the rocket's taking off, you can see, you know, it reaches peak speed a little bit before burnout, probably because we have a high thrust motor that's where most of the thrust is at the front end. It's actually slowing down as it's burning. But then at burnout, then it really drops off. And then it arcs over the top. This is Apogee. And it picks up a little speed as it's starting to come down. And then ejection, the parachute comes out and it will level off right here. But what I want to look at is the coefficient of drag is the green line. You'll notice that this green line is not flat like it is right here. At this point, the coefficient of drag is a constant number, but everywhere else during the flight, that coefficient of drag is changing. And that is going to affect the calculations. And so the question is, how accurate at any given time is the coefficient of drag? And that is the hard part, because we have really no way of verifying it. But if your altitudes are off, it's probably the coefficient of drag. And so to adjust for that, it's really hard. You could do a fixed coefficient of drag, but in real life, the coefficient of drag is going to change as the wind angle of attack changes. So as the rocket's taking off, it's going straight up. But if the wind hits it coming this way, it's going to cause it to do this, and now it's still going up, but now it's going up sideways. And so now your drag goes up, but then you're going to get a restoring force that's going to bring it around to the other way. So your drag is going to oscillate back and forth as the rocket, fishtails up into the sky. And this happens on all rockets. And it's like, how, and I always say that RockSim is not a drag calculation program. Everybody wants it to be, and I understand why you want it to be, because you want your simulations to be accurate, but it's so hard to predict drag. And this is why NASA doesn't get rid of their wind tunnels, because they actually have to measure it at different angles of attack and different velocities to make sure that they're zeroing in on that right coefficient of drag. It's a very tough thing to solve, but it's a really good question. But like I said, one of the things you could do is to go to the CD override right here, and you can uncheck this box, and then it will use this value right here, like 0.75. And then if we run a new simulation, and the only thing that I changed between this last one and this one was this one uses a fixed coefficient of drag of 0.75, so that if we go here to the plot and plot it, you'll see the line stays flat right here. See that drag coefficient line? It's staying flat until it gets to really high angles of attack, when it starts to arc over as it gets closer to apogee. So you can adjust the coefficient of drag, if your value, if here on this motor, if the flight went exactly 4,000 feet. So how do I get to exactly 4,000 feet? You'd adjust that coefficient of drag. I need a little bit less drag to go a little bit higher. So instead of using 0.75, we could try 0.7 and then run the simulation again. And I went from 35 to 36, not quite enough. So then I'd come back here to coefficient of drag, and I'm probably gonna have to use like 0.5. And try that. And now it's not too high. So somewhere between 0.7 and 0.5, you know, is that value that we want to zero in on. But then if you change motor, or yeah, if you change a motor or if you change your launch conditions, you're basically throwing in more variables. It's going to be, no matter what program you use, it's going to be hard. I wish I had a better answer, but in reality, coefficient of drag is just so hard to predict. Okay, Ashley says, okay, wait a minute. Arta Applewhite, wait a minute, I'm going, there's a lot of questions coming in. Arta Applewhite says, follow-up question, how could I account for the weight of spacers in a reloadable motor? For example, 1 grain G61 reload in a 3 grain case. Okay, so on that, that's a really good question, Art. So let's see, so let's find a rocket motor that's a 38 millimeter. So let's go with the Zephyr. I know that's a 38. Save your changes? No, I don't care about that. Okay, so here's a Zephyr, and we're going to load in a G61 is what Art is looking for. So I'm going to choose an engine, and here's the G. Oh, he wants a Cicerone. He's looking for a Cicerone G61. I got a G60. Oh, let's go to the Apogee website and see if there's a G61. So on the Apogee website, just type in G61. Hit enter. I got an Aerotech, but no Cicerone. Oh, he is talking about Aerotech motors. I'm sorry. So here is the G61. So I'm going to go to the page, and I want you to note some things here. So the total mass of the G61 is 194 grams. And that includes the propellant of 61.5 grams plus the casing and everything else. So a 38, I don't know what a 38 120 case is the difference between these two numbers, because this is the case that it uses. Now, let me see, open up a new tab. Open a new tab. Okay, so now let's do an RMS, MS 38 / 360. Okay, so here's the 38 360 casing. It doesn't show the mass. I was hoping it was going to show the mass. It doesn't show the mass. Because that's the casing, but you also have your closures on the end. What is a motor that uses that casing? So let's go to the I-180-14. Okay, so here is, let me get a calculator. I got a calculator open here. Okay, so we're going to take this number right here, 385 minus 180. 385 minus 180 is 205 grams, is the mass of the 38 360 casing plus the closures on it and all the stuff inside except for propellant. So 205 grams. And now, so that's the case we're going to use. And then the other one, this one, it was 194. Let me go back to my calculator. clear, where's clear? 194 right here, minus 61.5. This one weighs 132, so the difference between the two casings is 205 minus 132. So plus 205 equals 72.5 grams difference. So 72.5, that's the one thing, but now we need to add 2 spacers. So let's find, do we have spacers here? I'm looking for spacers. The spacers, they don't come by themselves. I don't want rocket motors. I want Aerotech casings and closures. And I'm looking for the reload adapter system. Reload adapter. There they are, 2938. Oh, and there's no weight here either. But, so we have the difference between the casings, and then we have to add the weight of these 2 cylinders. Those are the spacers. Let's say they weigh 15 grams each. So that's another 30 grams. So we're going to take 72 plus another 30. I'm just guessing here, 102.5 grams difference. So now we're in RockSim. We're going to select the G61. Yeah, we're going to say 14-second delay. And now we need to account for the difference in weight of the extra length of the case plus the spacers. RockSim doesn't have this built in. You're doing the right thing, Art, and you're trying to figure it out. So what we need to do, flight events, I'll just leave everything okay. So we loaded the motor with the G61, but at this point we haven't included the extra weight. We need to throw in another 102.5 grams, which is the weight of the spacers, plus the extra length of the case that we're going to use. So I'm going to put that in as a mass object. So I need to, it's going to be a circle with an M in it as a mass object. So I'm going to add it, and to do that, come here to Rocket Design Components. We're going to add it into the, I want to add it into the motor casing. This tube right here. Oops, I didn't want to open the casing. Save your changes? No. I wanted to add a mass object to that. And the mass object is going to, this is the database. I'm going to cancel out of the database. And so I get to this screen. I'm going to call it spacer plus extra 2 grain casing mass. And it's going to be 102.5. And so right now it's putting it right there at the front of the motor, and I'm just going to slide it back a little bit. I want to put it approximately where that extra mass is going to be in the rocket. And it's probably going to be somewhere right there. And I'll click OK. So there's where I added the new mass of the extra casing and the spacers. And so then you can do a launch, and you can look at the flight profile, and the rocket takes off, and it's mostly going straight. It seems a little slow, but we'll take a look at that in just a second. And it's coming down a long way, coming down sideways. Oh, and it just opened pretty close to the ground. The maximum altitude of this rocket was 786 feet. The number that I want to look at here is the velocity at launch guide departures at 35.8 miles per hour. That's actually okay. You know, I like to see that number above 30. Some people like to see it higher. When I was at National Sport Launch on Memorial Day weekend, the safety officer there was saying he'd like to see it at 50 miles per hour coming off the launch pad. That's quite a bit faster, but I can see their point. They're at a big launch with a lot of people, and they want to make sure that everything's safe. So that, you know, that higher liftoff speed, which is your velocity at launch guide departure, that means when it leaves the launch pad, how fast is it going? And like I said, they wanted to see 50 here. I like to see at least 30. When you get below 30, then the rocket can start really weathercocking, and nobody wants to see that. Okay, so hopefully, Art, that answered your question. It's a hard question because you have to figure out the mass of the spacers plus the difference in mass of the casings, the long casing, and then you're going to subtract out a short casing, and what's left is the difference between the heavier casing and the smaller casing. Okay, Ashley's got a follow-up question. He says, okay, so it would account for the smallest casing. I get it now. So if I use a bigger casing and spacers, would I need to add a little mass? And the answer is yes. You do need to add mass. Alfred Indy is in the house, and he says, in standard RockSim, since I had to reload software package, how do I change the max speed to Mach speed? I am asking here because I am too lazy to watch the old RockSim videos. Okay, so you got this maximum velocity, miles per hour. So how do you change this to Mach number? To do that, you got to go to the preferences. And I always forget where it is on Windows. So on Windows, it's under the Edit menu, and then on the Macintosh, it's under the RockSim menu. So you come down here to Preferences, then you go to the Units tab, and here's Velocity, and then under Velocity, you can change it to Mach. Once you do that, click OK, and then you see right here, before we were at miles per hour, now we're at Mach number. So this last G61 motor was its maximum speed was Mach 0.19. This one right here went over Mach. Look at that. That one went supersonic with a J453. Andrew Simon says, does RockSim simulate Micromax motors? And the answer is yes. It does simulate Micromax motors. The question is, are the Micromax motors loaded into your RockSim? Well, let's go. Go here to prepare for launch, and under Choose Engine, let's show all engines. And then under all engines, click on the diameter column, and it will sort them by smallest to largest. And you'll see right here at 6 millimeters in diameter, there's a Micromax 2 rocket engine. So yeah, so I'm going to load a Micromax into the Zephyr here, and we'll go launch. And look at this, the rocket did not leave the pad. That little tiny Micromax motor right down here did not move that rocket at all. Just not enough thrust. So yes, RockSim does simulate Micromax motors. Terry Wheelock says, what is the best type of image file to use in RockSim? The best type of image file. I'm not sure I understand that question, Terry. So what's this in regards to? What are you trying to do? And then what do you mean by best? So there's two questions I'm asking you. Carlos K., what altitude above sea level is Wally launching from? I have no idea. Wally will have to answer that one. Wally says, oh, thanks, Tim. That gives me something to work with. I launched in Virginia, elevation near 600 feet. Well, there you go. For painting. Oh, okay. What Terry's talking about. So he's painting his rocket. So let me see. So if you go to the 3D view right here, and you click on that, and this rocket does not have any painting, like decals, which is I'm assuming he's talking about. So let's open a file that I know has some decals. So you can go to the Apogee Avion, open that, and click open there. Open, save by changes, no. Okay, so this one does have images applied. So these are decals. So notice that the tube is not just a standard white tube. It has a decal on it. And the fins also have decals on them. And to apply those to the rocket, they're called textures. So under the body tube, and if I come here to texture, and it tells me the name of the file that has that texture image on it. So I'm looking at the file path for that image and see if I can open it from my browser. And it's in Applications, Program Files, not that one. I'm looking for either RockSim or Apogee. How come I'm not? Oh, here it is, RockSim 10. Designs, Apogee, Apogee Avion, and then here are the decals. So here's that file. If I open it, it will probably open it up in something like Paint. And we'll click Open, and it opens up MS Paint. And here is the decal file. So that is the image, and it really, the question is what file format. This one was a PNG. You can also use JPEG, and I think those might be the only two options. Like I could draw something on here. Look at that. Let's put a heart on my rocket. I don't know if I can paint that or not. I don't. Oh, look at that. And then file, I'm going to do a file, save as. I'll do it as a JPEG, and I want to put it in the same folder. How come on Windows I can never find, there it is, Program Files, RockSim 10, Designs, Apogee, Avion, and we'll call it Decal 3. And it's going to save it as a JPEG. Hit save. Okay. And if I go back into RockSim And if I choose a new file, and if I choose that new one, oh, that's not I'm not in the right folder. I gotta find my decal file. Okay, so there is the new one, Apogee. Okay. Stopped working. Uh-oh. Okay, am I working now? Am I working now? Let me see. I got my screens open here. It shows I am working. Am I working? That's better, says Wally. I'm back. What did you miss? Where did I lose you? We were talking about textures, and I changed the texture, and I put on a JPEG, but the file formats you can use are PNG, BMP, or the JPEG. And it doesn't really matter as far as which one's the best. I'm not a graphics guru, but there's only so much resolution you can put onto your rockets. And and it looks, when I zoom in, I can start to see it pixelating a little bit. And I don't know if I can do too much about that, no matter what format that it's in. 3D printer guy says, can I go anywhere to get decals printed? I don't know where to try. Well, you can make your own decals. Let me go, if you go to Amazon, you can search for decal printer paper, and there's two types. There's the inkjet printer type, or here's the inkjet or laser, and these are water slide decals. So the paper that you buy is special. It is, sometimes there's clear and sometimes there's white. The problem with printing your own decals is the color white. So, if I go back to the Avion rocket, trying to print a decal like this, just a stripe with a white stripe and a black stripe, it's pretty hard. Because you can't print white unless you have a special printer that can print white, And there are printers available that do that, but they're not cheap, and the toner or the ink is expensive, but it can be done. But normally you can print all your other colors except for metallics. Again, printing metallics is hard. So that's what I would do, and we do that a lot here at Apogee. Is, you know, we just buy. You can see how many different companies sell decal transfer paper, and they're water slides. So you print them, and then you cut it out with the scissors, and then you soak it in water, and the artwork will just slide right off. And so when it slides off, there's the carrier. There's kind of two parts of the paper. There's the backer, and then there's the part you print on. And like I said, you can get either clear or white. So you can print on white or you can print on clear, and then that will slide off, and then you can put it onto your rocket. Now, if you want to get vinyl decals, like we print them here at Apogee, we print our own vinyl decals. Let me say, let's see, vinyl. Like here's a katana. This is printed on a vinyl plastic. So instead of it's got a backer, and then the vinyl, which is a plastic, but it's thick. And then you print on that vinyl. And printing on vinyl, you're printing on plastic. So it takes a special printer with special ink that will, it's kind of like it actually prints an ink on it. It's not like a dye that changes the color. It actually is printed on there. And those are it's more durable because it's the plastic is thicker. But you could make a lot of designs just using the decal printer paper that you can just run through your printer. So if you have an inkjet or a laser printer, here at Apogee we don't have an inkjet, but we do have a color laser, and we have a black and white laser, and then we have our vinyl decal printer. And we make all three kinds, black and white, vinyl, and color. So that's my suggestion. Andrew Simon says, is there a way to launch a rocket with a passive upper stage? Example, tumbler with an ejected motor case. Yes. I don't know if you've noticed when we looked at the Micromax motors. First, let me find a two-stage rocket here. Let's go Midge, open. Oh, it crashed. I was saying, man, it took a long time. This happened last week too, and I told my programmer about it, and he was able to find the crash, and we've never been able to find that crash. Let me open it up again and try it again. File, open. What was I playing with? The Midge. Okay, so here's a two-stage rocket. And let's say we want to put a motor in the bottom stage, but nothing in the top. So now this is you have to do a trick. And here's the trick to how to have an upper stage that doesn't have a motor in it. And the trick is you got to put a motor in it. But the motor can be a special motor. And I put a special motor into the engine files, in the Apogee files. Oops, wrong button. I wanted to go to prepare for launch for this very situation. So this is our bottom stage. So let me choose an engine in the bottom stage. So we'll put an A10 0 in the bottom stage. And then in my top stage, I'm going to choose an engine. And right now it's looking for, I'm looking for only the engines that match the motor mount diameter. But again, if you do either show all engines or show engines that match the motor mount and are smaller, you'll see all these other motors, and I'll sort them by diameter. So at the very top is a motor called Dart, and then there's that Quest Micromax, and there's both 6 millimeters in diameter. And if we look at the total impulse here of this Apogee motor, it's a total impulse of 0. So in other words, it's a motor, but it doesn't make any thrust. And so we're going to use that motor in the upper stage. Did I choose it? Yeah, let's put in, I don't know, 9 seconds. Okay, so we loaded a motor in there. I'm going to say okay. So here is that little motor right here. This, let me zoom in and slide this. So this big brown box is the 13 millimeter A10, and this one is the 6 millimeter Dart motor. And when we launch this, let's see what happens. So let's go prepare for launch. Under flight events, this one's going to deploy this Dart motor at maximum ejection delay. And I think our maximum ejection delay is probably like too high. Let's make it 5 seconds. It's probably still too high, but that's okay. And starting state, let's make it a 36-inch launch rod. And launch conditions, that's okay. And let's do flight profile. Okay, so here's showing our 2-stage rocket, and let's launch it. The rocket took off. There's the booster. It fell down. The upper stage, it's unpowered, but you saw it. It's separated, just like we wanted it to, and it comes down on its own parachute. And the parachute, you know, how do you eject out a parachute that doesn't have an ejection charge in it? Well, then you probably have to use some sort of electronics or some other kind of timer system to eject it. So that is how you launch a rocket with a passive upper stage. So if I look at the graph on this rocket, and let's display the thrust and the altitude and velocity, and plot the graph. Let's make it a little bit bigger here so we can see it. Okay, so our thrust is the green line, and you can see the green line. It peaks up here to about 12 newtons, so that's at A10-0. Here's the burnout. Then we have velocity. The velocity peaked right at motor burnout, and then it started coming down. And our altitude, here's our altitude, is the blue line right there. What else could we see? If we also show, instead of altitude, let's show the mass. And plot the graph. Okay, it's really hard to see. So now the mass is the blue line. Let's change this. See right here, after this point, like about 3 seconds, nothing changes. So let's change this to at the following flight time of 3 seconds. I'm just making it so the graph is bigger. Okay, so here's the rocket. It starts out at a mass of 49.5 grams. And then the thrust is burning. You can see we lose a lot of thrust right here. So we're really burning off a lot of propellant, and then we're coasting a little bit. And then at this point, you see this big drop. So why would there be a big drop? And that is because the booster stage fell off. So this right here is just the upper stage alone, which is about 41.6 or 8 grams right here. So if I just display just the upper stage, and it shows just about 41.5 grams. So that's, as the booster dropped off, we started at 49 grams, it dropped off, and now we're down to 41 grams. So that is an unpowered upper stage, passive. 3D printer guy says, thanks Tim, I do have an old inkjet, so we'll have to use it again. Cool. Let me see if I have lost any questions. Alfred Indy says, Terry wants to place an animated GIF on his body tube and watch it play at launch. You can have a GIF, but it cannot be an animated GIF. RockSim is not that sophisticated. That would be kind of cool, where it's kind of like an LED display on the side of your rocket, or some kind of color changing. That's pretty. That'd be a pretty cool trick, though. I think I got all the questions. So there was a lot of good questions. There's a lot of people here today. Yeah, the casing with the spacers, that was kind of the hardest one. We also talked about coefficient of drag. Yeah, again, there's so much that we talked about. I appreciate everybody coming here. Next week, like I said, I'll be in Texas, but Michelle will be here. So have your questions ready. She can answer these kind of questions too. She's pretty good at RockSim. She may not know all of them, but if there's a question that she doesn't know, she'll ask me, and then I'll answer it the following week. So she will be here next week. Yeah, just trying to think. Same time, same station. So until then, go out and launch something. So we're going to end this in 3,